Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
This evening, we will commemorate the Shoah, and we welcome to our bima Aaron Kula and his Klezmer Company Orchestra Ensemble. We begin with a wordless melody. Let's join together.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
We are blessed to have with us, of course, Aaron Kula and his wonderful orchestra, who will help us to commemorate this Shabbat and to help us on this commemoration of the Shoah, the horrible tragedy and crime that claimed the lives of 6 million of our people in the course of the Second World War. And we're blessed also that we have with us tonight guests who are joining us from St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Seminary in Boynton Beach, and we're grateful to have them with us as they continue to explore their spirituality and their pathhood to the priesthood. And we're grateful to have all of you who are here with us in our sanctuary this evening, and all of you who are joining us at home, wherever home may be, here in our community or around the country, or around the world. We're blessed that hundreds join us online every single week, and we are grateful to have this collective congregation and community who come together to share this Shabbat. There is a passage in the Midrash where the rabbis note the difference between the way human beings work and the way the Holy One works. And they say a human being mints coins, and they all come out exactly the same. But when God mints human beings, each and every one of them are completely different and unique. And the rabbis remark on the extraordinary nature of the story of the creation of the world, in which during those sacred primordial days of creation, God creates swarms of bears, bugs, birds, and bees, but one human being. And they question, what does that mean? Why did God just create one single human being? And the answer the rabbis give is twofold. One is to teach that no matter who we are or where we come from, if you trace your lineage back far enough, you will see that we all extend from the same parents, which means that no one can claim my lineage is greater or more valuable than yours. But the rabbis in the Mishnah also contend that the reason why this was done in this fashion was to teach that a single human life, to save a single human life, is as if you saved an entire world. But to destroy a single human life is as if you destroyed an entire world. Tonight, as we celebrate Shabbat, we are asked to do something that is complicated and paradoxical, which is to celebrate the creation of the world. Shabbat, we are taught, is Zecher Maaseh Bereshit, a remembrance of the works of creation. And at the same time, on this Shabbat in particular, we focus on not just a world created, but worlds destroyed. Think about a single person whose life was taken in the midst of that horrible crime. Who might that person have been had they lived? No matter at what stage in their lives were taken. If it were a younger person, a child perhaps, one of the 1.5 million whose lives were taken before the age of 18. Exactly. Who might that person have grown to be? Who will this young person grow to be? What might they have discovered? Or what kind of jokes might they have told? What kind of laughter might they have engendered? What ideas might they have discovered that no one had considered before? What might they have taught or created or built? What lives might have extended from them? And when we think about the extinction of just one of those worlds, it's hard to even fathom the enormity of the horror that we seek to try to commemorate tonight. And yet, when we ask ourselves, how is it possible that a loving God who shares a covenant with our people could allow such a horrible tragedy to happen, we're reminded of the infinite holiness and power in one human life and what a single human being can accomplish in the midst of those kinds of horrors or tragedies. There are pages and pages, reams of testimony of not just humanity's inhumanity that was in the midst of the Shoah, but humanity's sacred humanity in the face of unbearable fear and torment. Ways in which a prisoner chose to sacrifice their rations of margarine or potato to fashion from that margarine and potato a ner shel Shabbat, a candle they might light to sanctify the holiness of the seventh day, on which they might have been denied the opportunity to rest or to reflect or to worship, but that they could still sanctify in that small way. Or the non-Jews who looked into the faces of persecuted Jews and saw in that face not the enemy, but their brothers and sisters, and who endangered their lives and the lives of their families to allow those lives to be protected and hidden and saved. Tonight, when we think about the remembrance of the works of creation, we remember that it is bequeathed to us the responsibility to build and rebuild broken worlds. As we remember the tragedy from decades ago, we also call to mind, of course, the tragedy of today and of yesterday and the day before, in which the lessons of the Shoah have not been fully learned, but are playing out again and again in different places around the world. And we are reminded that it is up to us to join with God to be Bonei Shemayim Va'aretz, builders of heaven and earth, partners in God in the work of creation, in order that we together might come together and redeem the horror of what we commemorate tonight, and to establish a world of Shabbat holiness, of Shabbat love, of Shabbat unity, and Shabbat peace. Shabbat shalom. Please take a moment and bid a good Shabbos to those who are seated near you, those in front of you, behind you, next to you. Wish them a good Shabbos. Introduce yourselves if you don't know them. And Shabbat shalom to those who are joining us online, and to those among our confirmation class who are getting service credit that they so desperately need this evening. Thank you very much. Our service begins on page 2 with the kindling of the Shabbat candles. Candles and Kiddush will be celebrated this evening by our bar mitzvah, Mark Kerberg, and his parents, Rachel Matz Hunter, and the rest of his family.
Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the heart's secret places. Blessed is the heart with strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you, Nathaniel, and also your parents, Rachel and Mark and Rob, as we continue with the Kiddush.
The heaven and earth were finished, and all their array. On the seventh day, God finished the work that God had been doing, and God ceased on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation that God had done.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'achava uvratzon hinhilanu Zicharon lema'anse bereshit ki hu yon tehila lemikra'e kodes zecher litziat mitzrayim Kivanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha v'chava uvratzon inchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mikadesh HaShabbat. Amen.
Chaim. Take a moment now as we embrace the presence of Shabbat. And close your eyes for a moment and ground your feet on the floor. Take a moment to take one good, solid, deep breath. Exhale all of the stress that you brought into the sanctuary with you, all of your cares and your worries and concerns, especially Nathaniel. He was nervous about tonight and he did great. You can take that big breath now. And as you ground yourself here in our worlds, see coming before you the emissaries of God's court, the ministering angels of God's realm, to welcome you into the holiness of Shabbat, into God's court, and into the pathways of peace. We rise together, page 24, as we welcome the holiness of Shabbat together.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei
standing and turn to page 28 for Baruch Hu.
La
30. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, u'chochma poteach she'arim, u'vitvuna mishane itim, u'machalif et hazmanim, u'mesader et hakochavim, v'mishmerotehem barakia kirtsono, bore yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים. תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, המריב ערבים.
In May of 1945, Rabbi Eliezer Silver from the United States and Rabbi Diane Grunfeld from England were sent as chaplains to liberate some of the death camps. While there, they were told that many Jewish children had been placed in a monastery in Alsace-Lorraine. The rabbis went there to reclaim them. When the rabbis approached the priest in charge, they asked that the Jewish children be released into their care. "I'm sorry," the priest responded, "but there really is no way of knowing which children here came from Jewish families." One of the rabbis had a brilliant idea. "Would it be okay if we came back again this evening when you are putting the children to sleep?" he asked. So that evening the rabbis came into the dormitory where row upon row of little beds were arranged. The children, many of whom had been in the monastery since the war started in 1939, were going to sleep. So the rabbis walked through the aisles of beds calling out, "Shema Yisrael, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one." And one by one, different children burst into tears and cried out, "Mami, Mama, and Mama, Mamushka," each in their native tongues. The words of the Shema still rang out with their parents' love, putting them to bed every night with the Shema on their lips. We rise.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Please be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
After fleeing from the train, I sprinted into the woods. I didn't know where I was or if I was still being chased. So I climbed a tree in whose leaves I nestled for days. Without food or water, I dared not move from my perch, lest I draw attention to myself. For the first time since that first day in the Montelupe prison, I pondered the possibility of hopelessness. I was exhausted to an extreme where I sat wide-eyed, and I felt parched beyond anything I could have imagined. Light evolved to darkness and back again. I was completely bereft in every conceivable way. I would be 20 years old in a month, but I couldn't take it anymore. It was time to surrender. So when I saw the unfamiliar insignia on the Army tank rolling ahead below, I decided to turn myself in. Climbing down from the tree, I walked toward the tank, hands in air, expecting to die at any second. The tank stopped and the hatch opened. Speaking my native Polish, I offered myself as a prisoner to the soldier who emerged. The man looked at me and in his best Brooklyn Yiddish told me that I had just surrendered to the Americans and that I had been liberated. I told them where the remainder of the Dachau trains were headed. They told me to stay behind as they went ahead to liberate the passengers on those trains. No way, I told them. I was going with them. I climbed to the top of the tank as we forged onward to free the survivors of the final march to the mountains. It was May 1945, and in commemoration of my 20th birthday, I was free. David Rosenblum.
גבעת אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
Lechaim
the music stands in stark contrast to the pain of those who suffered. Shabbat is supposed to feel like a perfect time, and even when times weren't perfect, we sang songs of Shabbat on Shabbat, even if they did not feel Shabbat-like. We continue with Vashamru on page 44.
שמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. איי 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 ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש. איי 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 ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם. בששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש.
Page 46, we rise and continue together with the tefillah.
Na 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 Adonai. Na 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 Sfatai Tiftai. Na 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 Ufi Agi Tehilateh.
Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei
וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי הכל, אתה רב להושיע מוריד אתה, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו בשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Please be seated. There was a man named Jacob Robinson who realized before the end of World War II that so many Jews had been lost, and he was trying to figure out how to determine the number of Jews who had been lost. The Nazis' meticulousness would help reaffirm this number, but he looked at censuses from times before the war and after the war. That is how the number 6 million came to be. We are a people that counts. It is not in sadness but in joy that we count the Omer, the period of time between Passover and Shavuot that marks the giving of the 10 Commandments. And so on this night, we continue on page 278 with the counting of the Omer.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al sefirat haomer, hayom 14 yom, shehem shnei shavuot,
Today is the 14th day, which is 2 weeks in the days of the Omer. Pearl Benish arrived at her camp and was assigned to a sewing factory in a large building under heavy guard. Mr. Weisblum, the foreman, told her her job was to sew uniform jackets. The minimum daily quota is 5 jackets. They have to be finished by the end of the day. And if you make 6, he added, you'll get a bonus twice a week, half a loaf of bread. Quota or no quota, she said, I could not allow myself to turn out shoddy work for the sake of speed. My father had been a perfectionist, so even now when I was tempted to speed up and put the job past me, I could not do it. So I labored frantically, first to meet, then to surpass the quota, striving for the 6th jacket with all my strength, to merit that precious half loaf of bread the next day or the day after. The next day, my anxious hands were able to turn out not 6, but 7 uniform jackets. I stashed one under the leftover raw material. 1 extra jacket a day would provide 5 or 6 to hand over on Shabbos. Again, the next day and the next, I turned out 7 jackets, oozing sweat and exhausting my last reserves of strength. At the end of the day, Weisblum examined the 6 jackets I'd left for him. He selected one and showed it to the girls. "Look, girls, this is how it should be done." Another day passed, then another. Then came the Sabbath, the day that I had loved so much, now a day that filled me with concern. In the morning, I braced myself to face my first Shabbos in Tarno. I sat down at my machine, and as I had done so many times before, withdrew the thread from the needle. In case the Germans pulled a surprise inspection, this would permit me to pretend that I was working. I had to be able to move the pedal and activate the needle without actually performing any labor. I'd just begun to relax when Weisblum suddenly noticed that my machine was idle, pedal, needle, and all, and that its operator was merely folding and unfolding her jackets. He came right over, his face red with anger. "Why aren't you working, you lazy brat?" he roared. "Mr. Weisblum," I said, "I'm no one's lazy brat. Here are my 5 jackets, all ready. Just yesterday you admired my work. I'll make 6 jackets this week for the next Shabbos if it will help. But please leave me alone. Look the other way." Since he was letting me talk, I added, "You'll share the reward of my mitzvah of remembering the Shabbos." "This is no time or place for mitzvahs," he screamed in rage. "I'll teach you a lesson. Get up." I obeyed. Now we were face to face. He extended a hand to slap me. I stared straight into his eyes, which met mine. Then I saw there a certain acknowledgement, a weak, fleeting Jewish spark. Had he recalled something from his parents' home, or a vestige of Jewish faith, cherished by generations of ancestors, survived? One way or the other, the spark was there. He could not extinguish it. At the last moment, he restrained himself, and his hand descended slowly, and he left me alone. We continue in silent prayer.
The stories which we recall on this evening, the testimonies that we hear, are just some of the many testimonies that have been captured in the decades since the last guns of war fell silent. And each of those stories is gripping and tears at the heartstrings because of the nature of the fact that we are reminded that in the midst of numbers that defy comprehension, like 6 million, there are these individual narratives. Brené Brown once said that narrative is data with a soul. The testimonies, the stories, the narratives, the episodes, the anecdotes that survivors share, bravely revisiting the challenges of their own memories and revisiting those horrible moments that they witnessed so that we can be there with them, are gifts, sacred and holy gifts that are bequeathed generation to generation so that their stories do not fall silent when their lips are silent, but that they continue to guide us and to help us to become what we need to be, guided by the inspiration of their stories and their narratives. Today, we take a few moments to focus on the stories of the experience of children when they themselves were witness to horror beyond comprehension. My dear friend Frida Jaffe, who is here with us this evening, became a member of Temple Bethel when this building was just 2 years old. We were reminiscing a little bit on the 42 years that you have graced this congregation with your presence, with your energy, with your volunteer service, and of course, year after year with your testimony. So many members of the congregation have been blessed to hear your story from your lips, from your resonance, from your experience, members of confirmation classes and others, including your own son's confirmation class. And we are so blessed to have Frida Jaffe here to share with us her story.
Shabbat Shalom. Just to start this, I always feel as though I have to apologize when I do a public appearance because everyone expects me to speak with a thick accent. I speak a number of languages and I'm a big fan of that, so if I disappoint you, I do apologize. Yom HaShoah is a very special and meaningful day of commemoration for me. It is the only yearly date when I can say Kaddish for my whole family, once a very large family in Poland. I have no cemetery, no burial spot, no place to visit and remember. So no matter how long ago I speak about my so-called childhood, it brings back very strong and very painful memories. I was 2 years old when Germany attacked Poland, and within days, life for all Jews in Poland became intolerable. My so-called childhood was spent in ghetto, concentration camps, and almost ended in a death camp by the name of Bergen-Belsen in Germany. When I was 4.5 years old, my mother, baby brother, and I were forced to watch the public execution by hanging of my father, Joseph Geltzman. Never can that be forgotten. Some months later, out of a large crowd near the train station in the city of Piotrków, a large crowd was gathered. Many, many years later, I found out that that particular transport lasted a whole week, and it took 22,000 Jewish men, women, children, but mostly the elderly and the children. We didn't know, and I had no way of knowing exactly where, but I learned. So my so-called childhood was basically in ghetto concentration camps and almost ended in a death camp by the name of Bergen-Belsen in Germany. When I was 4.5 years old, my mother, baby brother, and I were forced physically to watch the public execution by hanging of my father, Joseph Geltzman. Never can that be forgotten. Some months later, out of a large crowd near the train station in Piotrków, I was overlooked when my mother, holding my 1.5-year-old baby brother, was selected, pulled out of the crowd, packed into trains to a one-way trip to the gas chambers and crematoria of Treblinka. I tried to run toward her. In fact, I was screaming, "Mama!" Packed into the train store one way. I screamed. Mama was being held back by somebody. It turned out to be a sister of my mother. She literally pulled me back, put me down on the ground, put her hand over my mouth, and I was not able to follow. I really, wherever mother was going, mama was going, I was going to go too, but didn't happen. And once again, somehow I was meant to survive. Then I was 5 years old. Ultimately, not to go into a whole lot of gory details, it ended up in a place called Bergen-Belsen in Germany. If ever there is such a thing as a hell on earth, it would have been Bergen-Belsen. April 15, 1945, I'm 7 years old. British troop discovered a hell on earth, this Nazi death camp called Bergen-Belsen in Norman, Germany. As I said, I'm there now, 7 years old, starved, lice-infected, head shaved, filthy, diseased, yet somehow still alive. One of a very, very few little girls under the age of 10 to come out of this particular hell. Terrified, trying to disappear I was, hiding wherever filthy hole I could find. On this April 15, 1945, I was terrified, afraid of all the noise, the trucks, the soldiers. I never saw so many uniforms, but they were different. I never knew anyone before wearing a uniform that did not hurt or kill. However, this time there was something different, something very different about these soldiers. I saw them bending over, vomiting in the mud, A few of them tried to smile, then began some manner of communication in Polish, in Yiddish, in German. It became clear that I did not need to fear those uniforms, but I only knew to run, to hide, and so I did, back to my mud hole under a special my tree. At some point, somewhere day after, maybe hours after, a wonderful-looking, smiling British officer found me and somehow managed to convince me that he would not harm me, that these men in uniform represented help, food, water, that I actually would get clean clothes, that I would get food and water, and a place to sleep. I'm not sure that I even understood that word. I did not remember what clean meant, and I certainly did not know what a bed was. And then this kind and patient officer tried to explain to me that I was now free, that the war was over. I did not know what free or war meant. I only knew death, destruction, hunger, and pain. I survived the terror of Nazi deportations and killings, but I did not survive the Shoah, the Holocaust. It will always be a part of me. However, my immediate family did not survive. Eventually, long after, I learned that a sister and a brother of my mother did survive their imprisonment, their slave labor, their camps. And through yet another miracle, after they were liberated, one by Russians, the other by Americans, they found each other. And yes, my Uncle Barak found me, and ultimately the three of us left the DP camp of Bergen-Belsen, ended up in Brussels, Belgium, and then ultimately after 5 years there and many illnesses, and at the age of 11, 1951, I don't remember, and I wouldn't have known what the legal motions and experiments were at the time. But in any event, I was adopted by a distant relative and came to America, to a place called Fort Worth, Texas. I was 13 years old, but oh, I was so ready to become an American. For so many years, I knew very little about my family, my full family. I asked my aunt and my uncle. They eventually learned the fate of our large family. Talking about our life and families was just too painful, too difficult for them. Perhaps it was also their way of shielding me, of trying to protect me from all the horrors. And frankly, at that point in my life, and for a good number following years, I really wanted, I hoped to forget, and worked very hard to forget. My goal was to become a true, solid American. I succeeded. I craved learning. Reading is still a passion. And over the years, between schools and college and many, many scholarships, ultimately I married, and my husband Harold and I created a solid, meaningful life. And I have 2 brilliant sons and 3 magnificent grandchildren. But I was not at peace. I needed to know, in capital letters, I needed to know about my family. I knew that my parents, my entire immediate family, had to have a history, a meaning, a very full, meaningful life. In Piotrków, Poland, that was not a shtetl, and I just knew that they took advantage of whatever was available. I studied and I searched Holocaust information and documentation, especially about our life in Piotrków and Lutotów in Poland. Through all the facts and information, which was slowly becoming known about the Shoah, somewhere out there were facts, details, proof of who my family was, how we lived, and most specifically, who was I? For years, I searched through Piotrków survivors, several who had survived their own horrors and had known my family. I could not bring myself, actually, I could never bring myself to go to Poland, to set foot on that doomed and God-forsaken land. I searched Yad Vashem, Holocaust museums. I attended child survivors meetings and conferences. When I came to Boca Raton, I founded a child survivors organization right here in Boca Raton. I wrote to Poland, to civil records registry offices, to Polish embassies, and finally, April 24, 2008, that Yom HaShoah in particular will always be my foremost day of Zachor, of Yizkor, when I found several individuals who would take up my search for information. Spent a lot of money, which I didn't have, and a lot of time, but my need to know my history was so important. And yes, I did learn a great deal, but it will never, ever be a full history. I connected eventually with a Dutch woman who was living in Poland, and she decided to do her best for me. She ultimately located my birth certificate, my parents' marriage registration, their birthplaces, and oh, I could bore you with detail for all the stuff that she sent me. Because my family history is not just my history. It is also my children's history as well as their children's history. Believe it or not, I even learned that I was named Freida after my father's mother. So I ask myself, why continue to remember? I don't know, and I probably never will. But I do know this, for me, now and forever, Yom HaShoah remains a sacred mission of remembrance for the sake of humanity, if mankind is to survive. And for me, for the rest of my life, I shall remember the children. Zachor, Gedenk, remember.
Shelo yigaber leolam.
Earlier today, I got to spend some time with the youngest member of our congregation. He is 1 week old. Today was his bris. And as I looked upon little Jakey this morning and imagine what it took for the Holy One to place his soul into his body and bring that body to life here on earth, I was reminded of a passage from the Proverbs that says, Ner Adonai Nishmat Adam, that God's candle is the soul of the human being. Candles have become for us a symbol of a soul. The soul which journeys from the earth to the heavens like a flame tied down to the fuel by the wick, jumping and dancing, and at a certain point makes its escape. There's a Hasidic teaching that says that just as a candle in the flame seeks to leap ever higher, the nefesh of God seeks to leap out of the body and embrace the heavens. The wick tethers the flame, the body tethers the soul, keeping it grounded and constrained. We see before us 6 candles. 6 candles that in a moment we will light to commemorate the lives and hopefully bring and sustain the life of the 6 million souls who were lost. To light these candles, I want to first invite Frida and Anya, and if there are any other survivors who are with us this evening, please come forward. Grandchildren of survivors, and so if you are a child or a grandchild of a survivor, please come forward and join us as well.
Okay.
this time I invite everyone to please rise as we move towards the ark to offer words of prayers for healing. Mishaberach Avotenu V'Imotenu. May the God who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bring the gift of refuah shlema, of healing of mind, of body, and spirit, to those in our families and our community who are suffering from illness or from injury. For those of you who are joining us virtually, I invite you to call the name of your loved ones to mind at this time as we here in the congregation think and pray for the healing of Meredith Abramson, Marlene Aaron, Benita Appel, Fred Belkin, Mike Blackman, Margie Berman Block, Kathleen Bowersox, Dorothy Buxbaum, Ed Burns, Ed Cantor, Stephen Danitz, Richard Diamond, Jay Eichler, Arnold Erne, Esther Tehila Bas Ariel Tzipora, Rhonda Finlay, Raven Holzer Frankel, Marty Fromowitz, Marcia Gerson, Larry Guys, Jake Goldstein, Rona Guberman, Arthur Haspel, Marcia Hoffman, Keith Homer, Richard Kamen, Mirtha Kaplan, Mitch Kaplan, Deanna Katz, Judy Kornitsky, Joni Kramer, Rita Lokitz, Steve Lyons, Marba Mallet, Barbara Morris, Beverly Nash, Michael Penn, Milton Plotzker, Norma Palchik, Jackie Robinson, Jeffrey Romer, Ron Rose, Eileen Rosenbaum, Alan Rosenfeld, Jim Satovsky, Jamie Schaefer, Mark Sosin, Leah Sopraner, Bobby Warden, and Joan Weidenfeld. We add to those names those you say now as we go around the congregation. Baruch Adonai Rafeh HaCholim, we praise you, Adonai, who helps bring healing to the sick. Standing and turn to page 282 for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateit gedulah yotzei b'reshit, shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot, ve'lo asamanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu gahem,
To invite up our Temple's President, Wendy Whalen, to bring greetings and announcements on behalf of the Board of Trustees.
Shabbat Shalom. I'd like to thank the clergy for a beautiful, beautiful service tonight, and of course to Frida Jaffe for sharing your story of survival with us. And to Nathaniel, Mazel Tov. And to your family, your dad, Mark, your mom, Rachel, and of course, Rob also, and to your whole family, we wish you Mazel Tov. It was kind of a heavy service tonight. Okay, so let me go on. We hope to see you next Friday, May 6th, for Blue Jeans Shabbat, where we will be celebrating Israel. You can wear your favorite blue jeans and rock out to an Israeli-themed evening celebrating our Jewish homeland. It's the early service at 6 o'clock, followed by a delicious Israeli-inspired Shabbat dinner. Prices increase on April 30th and registration closes on May 3rd, so please visit our website to register, and I hope to see you there next week. Don't miss Mother's Day brunch on Sunday, May 8th at 11 a.m., hosted by our Brotherhood at the Schaefer Family Campus. You can enjoy great food, music, and family time as you celebrate the most important lady in your lives. And you can tune into Lunch and Learn for the month of May to hear from Professor Paul Lips, teaching about Israel and its history of protests. You can visit our website for links to join by Zoom or view on live stream. You can go to tbeboca.org for that information. And we hope that you join us after services for a beautiful enhanced oneg, which this evening is sponsored by our Bar Mitzvah family, Kerberg and Hunters. And as you make your way out towards the Welcome Center when you leave, please stop by our tzedakah box and consider a contribution to our tzedakah fund. Our Social Action Committee disperses those funds to local nonprofits to support their very important work. You can visit our website for lots more information about upcoming events. And Shabbat Shalom.
What additional announcement this Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. as we mark and celebrate Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, we will be screening a film entitled Upheaval, the story of Menachem Begin. And so we invite everyone to join us this Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. More information about that, of course, can be found on our website, tveboca.org. As I was laying in the hospital, I didn't think I was going to make it. So I had a direct line to God. I said, "Dear God, I got so much more to tell. Don't kill me now. Let me stay alive for a week so I can speak. I have so much to tell. And as you can see, the world is broken in pieces now. People killing each other. We thought we already went through hell. We thought we did it already, and so we thought the world would be more peaceful, more friendly. But you see, the hate and discrimination, anti-Semitism is still going on. So before I leave this world, I hope that you all can take over, and don't let it happen to anyone. Don't discriminate against anybody. Don't hate anybody. You saw what hatred can do. It all starts with children, because children do not get born with hate or discriminate against anybody. So they must be learning it through their friends, or they must learn it from their parents, maybe. I don't know. But I hope this should stop, and I hope before I leave this world. It may not happen by the survivor's time because we getting older. All we can do is tell you our story, and maybe perhaps one day it will stop. At this time, we call to mind those who have passed recently and at this season in years past. If you are observing a yahrzeit or in a period of mourning, we invite you to rise as the name of your loved one is recalled, and those of you joining us virtually, if you are saying Kaddish for a loved one, to think of their name at this time. As tonight, the anniversary of their passing the yahrzeit, we remember Ruth Appel, Ida Applebaum, Esther Glowitz-Arno, Sidney Balaber, George Bell, Elliot Benjamin, Harold Bergner, Rose Birkenwald, Herman Bischens, Ida Block, Sally Broido, Estelle Cartine, Sidney Chaikin, Julio Chavez, Gernard Cohen, Ilse Cohn, Irving Cooper, Samuel Solomon Davidson, John Durr, Belle Eder, Marion Pollinger, Feinsilber, Samuel Gallup, Joseph Garber, Joseph and Paula Geltzman, Ann F. Gelfand, Bernard Goldberg, Leah Goldberg, Evelyn Goldenberg, Saul Goldenberg, Ilse Gordon, Saul Gorlick, excuse me, Helen Gottlieb, Lillian Granick, Benjamin Green, Rosalind Greenhouse, Harriet Hames, Ross Higgier, Joseph Hirsch, Lawrence Hoffman, Nat Jacobs, J.R. Jonas, Norman E. Jutras Sr., Goldie Kaplan, Shirley Kaplan, Lillian Carlett, Herbert Kirschner, Martha Kirschner, Rex M. Klein, Rosamund Kaufman, Hyman Konis, Marilyn Konis, Sidney D. Kronish, Howard Shantz, Harold Kurzman, Joseph Lessons, Mark C. Levine, Nettie G. Levitt, Herman Luckoff, Irving Marin, Manny Meth, Harold Myers, James Jim Moran, Ron Nelson, Ethel Orkin, Bobby Ornstein, Morgan Nathaniel Patterson, Maurice D. Plow Sr., Harry Reiner, Alan Richland, Lewis Robbins, Harry Roth, Phoebe Rosenberg, Florence J. Ruskin, Dorothy Sheffman, Samuel Schur, Carolyn Lowe Schwartz, Harry Scott, Morton J. Scudder, B. Shane, Alice Shapiro, Alexander Shiowitz, Lawrence Siegel, Sidney Simon, Alice Simon, Edith Singer, Rachel Solnick, Benjamin Soloway, Sella Spellman, Herbert Spilka, Herb Sterneck, Elaine Cernammer, Esther Thompson, Israel Trestman, Lillian Van Wy, Leonard Lenny Weiss, Jean Weiss, Merle Wolfe, Seal Wolin, Ira Stewart, Yavarkovsky, and David Young. And those who have passed in the last 30 days, we remember Barry Sterneck, Mildred Barron Holtz, Dr. Joel Niznik, Paul Berkowitz, Phyllis Katcher, Sonia Schwimmer, Pearl Shapiro, Clarence Coulter, Leonard Kirker, Noreen Rubin, Milton Herman Weiss, Larry Feidelman, and Deborah Scheinen. If there are others for whom you are saying Kaddish, we invite you to rise now and share their name with the congregation as we go around. Zichronam livracha. May their memories always be for a blessing. We rise now as a congregation and turn to page 294 as together we say the words of Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei rabbah, be'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala uvizman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'alam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'imromav huya asei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who sends peace from the high heavens send peace to all of us and comfort the bereaved among us as together we say, amen.
I'd like to thank all of our wonderful musicians this evening. Vindhya Kari on the piano. Thank you so much, Aaron Kula, this evening for your accordion and your artistry and bringing these wonderful musicians, Shasha Zhang on the violin, and Isam Abu Arkum on clarinet and flute, and our friend James McCoy on the bass. Thank you also to Jason and to Ron and to Kira in the booth. And we'd like to invite Nathaniel to come up and help us lead Motzi, but let's all join in the words first of Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom b'yamav, Uya Oseh Shalom aleinu,
God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Eat some, take some, give to your family.